This is Anna Bevan Gravely with NCFREE, and I'm joined by Judge Chris Brooks, who is running for Court of Appeals. And you've actually just celebrated your 1 year on the Court of Appeals. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. I have been on the court for pushing 14 months now. I took my seat on the court in April of 2019. So just about 14 months. And so all of this has been very new. This is the first time I've been a judge. It's the first time I've ever run for political office as well. So fortunately, we get to increase the degree of difficulty a little bit by also doing all of this in a pandemic. So I refer to, this is my dining room that I'm in right now. I refer to the campaign that's going on right now, like the sweatpants campaign, because I'm just constantly in sweatpants doing videos like this. But, you know, in all seriousness, we have our health, and we're, you know, we have jobs that we can easily do remotely. So we feel very fortunate about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for, I love the honesty and the transparency. I think all of us are doing the exact same thing, dressing up on the top half and sweatpants on the bottom half. It's like a commercial that's come to real life.
It's true. It's very
true. Yeah. So just diving into the questions, which one of the current or recent U.S. Supreme Court justices best reflects your judicial philosophy?
I'm a big admirer of Justice Elena Kagan, who's on the Supreme Court now. First off, and this is true, I think, to a man and woman on the Supreme Court, obviously all of them are exceptionally smart. That's certainly true of Justice Kagan. I think that there's a pragmatism and practicality to the way that she approaches problems, and that I try to bring to cases that are in front of the North Carolina Court of Appeals, which is, you know, really understanding, here are the arguments that are in front of us, here are the issues that are in front of us, and how do we clearly, concisely address the arguments that are being made. And, you know, another thing that I admire about Justice Kagan, which I think is underappreciated, is that she's a really excellent writer. I think that she and Chief Justice Roberts are probably the two best writers on the Supreme Court. And I think that not only makes you more persuasive, but also I think, you know, what we're trying to provide to litigants are clarity in regards to what the rules of the road are, based on the law and based on our precedent. And being able to write clearly and succinctly about the case that's in front of us really helps litigants going forward and provides predictability going forward.
Excellent point. So how would you, and I think you touched on it a little bit in that answer, but how would you better describe your judicial philosophy?
Yeah, the word that I think of and try to bring and try to keep in mind is just being practical, and trying to answer the question, the legal question that's in front of us, do so clearly. And, you know, the other thing that's important about the North Carolina Court of Appeals is we're an intermediate appellate court. Very frequently, the answer is in our precedent, either a precedent that's been laid down by the state Supreme Court or the state Court of Appeals. So it's really an effort in identifying that precedent and finding a way to apply it to the facts. And returning to the point of practicality, from when I practiced, but also from my time on the bench, nothing made me more frustrated than the same law and the same facts producing a different result on a different day. And that's something that was very hard when I was a litigator for me to prepare for, because you don't know, what's going to carry the day. And it's something I try very hard, in my opinions, to avoid, because you want them to be practically useful, not only in answering the question that's directly in front of us, but also practically useful going forward when attorneys advise their clients about particular circumstances.
So we are the North Carolina Free Enterprise Foundation, and we focus a lot on free enterprise. It's so important we put it in our name. But what would you say the key principles of free enterprise are?
Well, to me, and I think everybody defines it differently, but sort of competition, fairness, predictability are some of the key equities that are involved there. And some of those resonate more with, legislative candidates that you're likely talking to, and candidates for executive branch positions that you're likely talking to. I do think predictability is an equity that is very important in the free enterprise system, and is something that definitely resonates with me as a judge and resonated with me as a litigator for the reasons that I just said. When I represented businesses, when I worked for a law firm, you'd have clients call you up and say, what's going to happen in this circumstance? How should we handle this circumstance? And, you learn pretty quickly, and it's sort of the law school answer, that to a certain extent, the answer is always, it depends. But you want to try to shrink the amount that it is, it depends, and say, here's the answer, or here are the different ranges of answers depending upon how different variables play out. When folks set up businesses, or, and this is really applicable across the cases that come in front of us, from criminal law cases to family law cases to business disputes. You want people to be able to advise their clients about what is likely and have an idea about what the important equities to take into account when they're making business decisions, when they're making employment decisions and the like.
Yeah. So what kind of jobs, interests, or volunteer activities did you pursue during school and law school?
So I worked the majority of the time that I'm a double Tar Heel, so I went to UNC for undergrad and for law school. And I worked increasingly as I went through undergrad. I worked one summer, the first summer, at a City of Raleigh summer camp, so I was a camp counselor. I worked later on in my undergraduate career time at UNC at Moorhead Planetarium, which everyone says, oh, that's so exciting. I worked in the gift shop. So I sold like glow dough and watched kids use the gravity well with coins for hours on end. But I also worked at a local law firm, answering phones and helping them with courier responsibilities. And then at law school, I worked one of the summers at the law firm that I ultimately ended up starting practicing at right after I graduated from law school. And I think you were also asking about volunteer and opportunities and interests, because I get going and I forget where I'm at. So volunteer stuff, when I was an undergrad, I know I volunteered some at the Ronald McDonald House in Chapel Hill, which I actually live relatively close to now. In law school, I was the director of the UNC Law Pro Bono program, which worked to put law students together with pro bono legal opportunities. And really tried to expand access to justice and provide low wealth North Carolinians with further legal, with further options in regards to legal representation and assistance. But also it was a skill building tool for law students, getting an opportunity to really practically help a client. Interests have been the same since I was 4 years old, which is basketball and hiking. And so the pandemic has made it a little bit easier to have more time for hiking, because it's a thing that you can do relatively safely. I miss getting to play basketball. I played soccer on Monday evenings as well, and I miss that as well. And I'm not looking forward to, I am looking forward to when this is over, obviously, but I'm not looking forward to the first couple of soccer matches when I come back from however long a layoff I'm going to be, because I'm just going to be tripping over myself for years and years to come.
I think that's how a lot of us feel about gymming activities. We're going to go back in the first 3 weeks. It's going to be like our bodies never even lifted a single weight. It's going to be rough.
That's right.
So what has been your greatest accomplishment in your legal career and in your personal life?
It's a very interesting question.
It's hard to narrow down sometimes, so I feel you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I chose a very specific and a very broad answer. From a professional standpoint, I got the opportunity to argue at the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in front of an en banc sitting of that court. So the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals is is a part of the federal court system. It's the step before the United States Supreme Court. So it's roughly compatible to the North Carolina Court of Appeals in the federal court system.
Okay. Yep.
But it's the step before the United States Supreme Court. And they typically, like we do at the Court of Appeals in North Carolina, sit in 3-judge panels. I lost a case 2-1 in front of a 3-judge panel, and then we petitioned for an en banc review, which is all 15 judges sitting at the same time. And they granted en banc review, and they ended up reversing the panel decision 10-5 in an opinion that was written by former Chief Judge Harvey Wilkinson, who's a Ronald Reagan appointee to the Fourth Circuit. And it was in a massive courtroom, and the crazy thing about it was being asked questions, and you would kind of know that the question came from your left, but you'd have to try to figure out exactly who asked the question, because you would be staring straight ahead, and then you'd have to sort of toggle to your left or to your right, because there are people really only maybe 5, 10, 15 degrees ahead of you as the party arguing. So it was a very singular experience. And then I was, the opposing side sought a review from the Supreme Court of the United States. And we went through briefing on that, and the Supreme Court did not review that case. They have discretion about which cases they'll review. They chose not to review that case. So we were able to take the case I argued at the Fourth Circuit en banc and stand up that victory at the U.S. Supreme Court. From a personal standpoint, I have a very happy family life and home life with my partner, Maura, and that's just a very nice thing. And it's something that I try not to take for granted. And it's something I especially try not to take for granted when we're in the house together, almost all of the time now. But there's no one that I'd rather be hanging out
trapped with
on a 24/7 basis than her.
Well, that's awesome. So a quick question about the en banc. Is that correct? Did I say it correctly? Sure. How often do they do that?
That very rarely. That year, I believe, heard 2 cases en banc, and our case was one of those 2. It differs year to year. There are years in the past decade where they have not heard a case en banc, and then I think they've, the most that they've heard in a year is probably 3 or 4. So it's a pretty rare experience, and it's certainly something that I will never ever forget. Yeah,
man, that sounds pretty awesome to have gone through that. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
What is your vision for the future of our judicial system, and what changes would you advocate for, and why?
One of the things, and first it's, I'm a junior member of our court, so I am very humble about that, and I know that I'm new to this. And when we have court conferences, I do my best to keep my mouth shut, because there are a lot of other people in that room who know a lot more about the functioning of the Court of Appeals, and I view those as opportunities to learn. Our court system has recently moved to, and it did not previously have, sexual harassment training as part of the appellate court system. And the Supreme Court, working with our court, is sort of taking the lead on putting together some training in regards to sexual harassment in the judicial workplace. And also, just trying to eradicate that in the judicial workplace. That's something that obviously there have been some examples in the federal court system over recent years that have been troubling, and that, I think really businesses in a lot of ways have provided some good best practices there, because they recognize that that's a good way to have an inclusive workforce that's going to be able to bring all of the strengths of North Carolina to bear. So I think there's some really good models out there for us to look at. And on a similar point, and it was fascinating that this question, which I thought was a very good question, was asked by the North Carolina Association of Defense Attorneys at their recent forum. They ask about implicit bias, and sort of a similar question to the question you asked about what concrete steps I would suggest in regards to that is obviously a very timely question. And I think that to a certain extent, they're obviously different, but there's some similar equities around ensuring that everybody can be as effective as possible in the workplace. I think the sexual harassment training and the implicit bias training that I think we're talking about, or perhaps looking at for the appellate court system, both would really help to make the judicial workplace a more inclusive place, but also a place where it's plain that everybody is welcome, and also a place where we all recognize that none of us are perfect. And part of what I love about being a lawyer and what I love about my job is getting to learn new things on a day in, day out basis. And these are two areas where there's always something to learn. We all carry around the sort of weight of our biases that we know about and some that we don't know about. So I think that those are two sort of concrete things that one of which I know we're moving forward with, and one of which I think that we probably benefit from moving forward with.
Yeah, well, awesome. Thank you so much for spending time with me and sharing your views with NCFREE and our community. Before we close out, where can our members go to learn more about you?
I have a campaign website. It's keepjudgechrisbrook.com, keepjudgechrisbrook.com, and that's Brook. I just spell it at this point because we're the only folks who spell it that way. Everybody else has an E or has an S. And we're the weird folks who don't. So but that's where you can find out more about me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day, and good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.